Good morning. Welcome into Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. We're live on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube, as well as live from Lucas Oil Stadium here at Big Ten Media Days. I'm Ravi Lulla here with my guy, DB.
What up?
What's up, man?
How we doing?
Oh, we're doing all right.
Do you feel like the camera is close? I feel like it's awful close.
I don't know. I can't really tell.
You're not sure?
I mean, I'm looking at yours. It's further away than it usually is because we usually got the ones like right up here in our face,
See.
Yeah, it's a little better, Don't have to worry about adjusting our little webcams.
Oh, yes. Yeah, yesterday we were kind of diagonal. We shot it from the long way.
That's true. We had I believe they call it a long angle when in the biz.
Yeah, whatever.
They probably don't actually. I don't know anything about that.
Oh, he finally moved my trash can. Dang it.
People love the long shots.
There was
my man, Money Mike. He sent me a text. He said, I dare you to move that trash can in front of the Iowa logo. I was like, done. I was like, hey, Sasha, where do I have to move this trash can to get it in front of the Iowa logo? She goes, oh, that was actually pretty good.
And it was there for whole day.
Yeah, and then this guy taking pictures
of a lift for something. I don't really know what's happening here.
Yeah.
I don't know what's going on.
Lift for the Big Ten. Maybe they're doing something creative.
Well, that doesn't seem likely.
We have the creative content. Let's get film. Pops up anytime team with us. You know how easy that stuff happens? But never know what's going to make it to social media.
Yeah.
Wait, you were recording that? What?
Apparently Avery is just shooting a reality show of me and DB.
Well, it's so that must suck being creative. What's that like?
I'll never know.
Yeah. Makes two of us.
Let's actually start there because you've talked about this a little bit. This is my first experience at Big Ten Media Days, and you've been here several times, obviously, and have seen it go from the basement of a Chicago hotel.
Well, we started out as the Fugitives, so it was in the old Fugitive Hotel first.
Okay, and that wasn't in the basement.
No, and then we moved to the basement
of a different hotel.
McCormick, maybe.
Okay,
and then we've gone to Indianapolis.
Which I kind of like having it in the stadium. I think that's cool if they, had entrances open that were supposed to be and had a proper amount of elevators in the building. That would probably be helpful.
Yeah.
But it is kind of cool to be out here and like be on the field and everything. But it's a little, when you see like SEC Media Days on TV and you see some of the other stuff that the other conferences are doing, it kind of leaves a little to be desired. It just feels like, especially, you heard, you heard in the intro, like, hey, we're coast to coast now. Like, why is this whole thing not about being the first national conference?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of different. I'm glad I feel like I'm not out here on an island so much anymore because I think now maybe you just need a perspective by being here.
Yeah.
But remember, my whole thing was trumpeting just the conference more. Like I said, cheerleading may be too strong of a word, but
celebrating is legit though.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that.
I mean, it was a huge coup for them because I mean, let's rewind here, right? Texas and Oklahoma announced they're going to the SEC, and it looks like the SEC is just off to the races.
Yeah.
Like they're leaving everybody behind. I remember Big Ten people, Nebraska people being like, oh, well, I guess we're just playing for second now in terms of conference, prestige. And then they pull off this enormous coup of UCLA and USC pretty quickly after. And you're like, oh, I guess the Big Ten's not playing around. And then they double down and go get Oregon and Washington. And you're like, oh, this is a for real deal. This isn't 1-2 or 1A, 1B. This is number ones at worst, right? And like, I don't know why that just isn't the theme of this entire thing. And yes, there's way more to celebrate than that. But I mean, Coach Rule, I think, is the only one we heard talk about yesterday talking about how Big Ten is the best conference in the country. To me, the Big Ten is the NFL of college football.
Yeah, playing the schedule, embracing, the challenges of travel. And
yeah,
he said something that kind of flew under the radar that I loved that he's going to put himself to. He's like, the staffs that I think are the smartest and can work logistically will be able to thrive.
Mm-hmm.
With navigating the logistics geographically within this conference. And I'm like, there's definitely something to that.
Yeah, because we've heard people complain is probably too strong of a word, but kind of discuss the challenges in a way. It's like, well, I mean, some days we're going to be getting in at like 3 o'clock in the morning, and guys aren't going to get back to bed until 5, and then whatever. And I get it, right? Those are challenges.
They're legit issues.
Yeah, they're legitimate issues. But is there anything you can do about those issues? That's the reality of playing in the Big Ten now, right?
And it's a prime real life example of what we talked about in terms of not succumbing to things that just don't get sidetracked by the negatives. Try to maximize as best you can the situation and move on.
Because there's a lot of positives that come along with that situation too.
The opportunity.
The opportunity of being in the Big Ten, of playing these marquee games and this marquee schedule, and just logistically, the money.
Yeah.
The money that's going to be there for the Big Ten in the future because they're the only national conference. I mean, the SEC made it pretty clear that, and I don't know that I believe them long term, but at least for now, they're pretty happy with being a regional conference.
Yeah.
Right? You heard Sankey talk about that. The Big Ten should embrace being like, hey, we're a conference for the whole country. Right?
Riley.
Is that not a message that you would be broadcasting if you were the Big Ten?
100%.
It's just be, hey, we're a conference for the whole country. No matter where you're from, we got you covered.
Yeah, big life, big stage, Big Ten.
There
right?
you go.
That's the theme, right?
It is.
Big life, big stage, Big Ten. That's their moniker.
Yeah, it's literally on the ribbon right now in the stadium. And
do the big stage thing.
Yeah. Because I think they meant literally they've got an actual big stage. Let's make it a little more metaphorical. Like embrace the big stage of being the only national college football conference. And it has been, I mean, I don't want to sound ungrateful. Like, it's a really cool experience for me to be here. This is my first one. I always, it was like kind of like the spring game this year at Nebraska. I know the spring game doesn't matter that much to most people. It was a little cooler this year because you had like new offensive pieces. People were excited to see Dylan, stuff like that. But for me to be credentialed for any Nebraska football event was really cool to me. It's kind of the same thing with Big Ten Media Days. But I do sit here and I wonder, like, how much better.
There's more out there.
100%.
Yeah.
They're leaving a ton on the table.
More out there.
Especially when you've got your own network to be able to do whatever you want with. You're not relying on ESPN.
Although the cool thing is, and we saw this Tuesday before we left, and we've seen Heather Dinich all over the place. As she's kind of been the voice, right? She's the liaison between the 4-letter network and what's going on here at Media Days. I do like the opens, doing the shows from here, giving her 15, 20, however long, just to make sure that people understand the importance of this conference.
Right? It was on ESPN a ton yesterday.
Yeah.
It got a lot of run, but you're also not relying on ESPN for your programming or to get your message out, right? It's a bonus, right, that they are covering this, and they'd look silly if they didn't, right? Because there are so many national brands in the conference. But I feel like they're just leaving a ton on the table in terms of whether it's the media experience, whether it's the players' experience. Avery was talking about yesterday how, at the SEC Media Days, they were going around. They got like customized cowboy hats and stuff like that. Like, they were doing cool things for the players. And I just, maybe I missed it because I'm not doing the same stuff as the players are doing, obviously. But it doesn't seem like there's a lot of that stuff to make it a memorable experience for the people involved.
I know it can be a long day for media. Did you get the sense that it was a long day for coaches and players?
100%.
Yeah, there's a lot more that goes on than
100%. By the end of it, you can kind of just tell.
And some folks that were hangry, weren't they?
Yeah. And I mean, I'm glad that we got not just the people in our crew.
I meant the players, like, no, it's snack time. Remember that was the infamous line yesterday. It was 3:30. I mean, these guys are ready to refuel.
Especially with the Nebraska guys that are used to being on, Kristen's like German like train schedule, right? Like, where it's just like, hey, they run on time, and it's a totally different thing there. But yeah, I'm glad that we got, at least, for our guys, that we got them early, because we were the first people to get Coach Rule. We were first or second for Gifford and Ben Scott and Ty Robinson, which you got Gifford yesterday. If you had issues over the air, I think there was a little cutouts. You can get Gifford either in the YouTube or on the podcast from yesterday. And then we will have the Ben Scott and Ty Robinson interviews in today's show. We did them yesterday. A little peek behind the curtain. Sometimes you pre-record stuff, guys. It's okay. But that's when Nebraska was available. So we'll have that in the show for you today to make sure you get it.
Yeah, a lot in there. Pretty good stuff.
Oh, 100%. Really good stuff from all three of those guys. Obviously from, Coach Rule is always great. But I kind of felt like Coach Rule is sort of the only one that was here that was trying to do what we wanted in terms of what we're
speaking
talking.
for the conference on the national stage.
100%.
Yeah.
And being sort of
that's good. That's a good tell.
Like kind of being the spokesperson for not just Nebraska, but the conference as well, and championing the conference and what it can bring to the table. We talked about this a little bit yesterday. It just feels like there's a tension a little bit between who the Big Ten used to be, kind of the athletic Ivy League is sort of how I like to think about it sometimes, and who they've turned into in terms of this national athletic conference. And that doesn't mean you can't still care about academics, right? That we heard Coach Rule talk about it yesterday. Highest team GPA in history. Being good at sports or caring about sports doesn't mean you can't be good at school, right? Those are not mutually exclusive items. I don't understand why they can't be like, hey, we want to be excellent in everything. Today is about football. That doesn't mean we care less about academics.
And you touch both coasts. So
the only conference that does, I mean, I guess the ACC does, but nobody cares, if I'm being honest.
Well, you're going to have a fit if Miami, FSU, and my dark horse on Louisville, any of these teams make some noise.
Oh, it's not that, because those are like in the footprint, but like Cal and Stanford aren't doing anything.
Oh, by the way, that's where Stanford landed. How about that?
I know. I mean, SMU's the one that gets me. I'm like, oh yeah, SMU's an ACC
and they're
school.
quietly going to be okay.
Yeah, they're not bad at all.
Going to be a thorn in the side for somebody. You can bank on that.
I like Rhett Lashley. I think he's a good coach, and that was a good hire for them. And I have this weird fascination with SMU just from the whole death penalty deal.
Pony Express.
Yeah. But it's letting flourishing right now to celebrate. Like, the Big Ten's not in danger. The ACC is in existential danger, seemingly based on what a court's going to decide. That's not where the Big Ten's at. Like, the Big Ten's doing just fine.
Yeah.
And you would never know. Like, this is the level of like subdued I would expect from the ACC, as they're just trying to not drown.
Yeah. So, and there's so many different things going on that the Big Ten will have a chance to stay ahead of. We talked about, scholarship limits and what it meant for other sports. And how about Coach Rule just casually dropping? I said, hey, now go work on those scholarship or those roster limits. He said, bro, that ain't happening. You can thank SEC baseball for that. I just was like one of those unintended consequences.
I think that was one of his walk-offs. I think it was his walk-off.
I mean, because I knew he had researched. He was elbows deep, man. He was ready to roll his sleeves up, and it's just like.
And I think he wanted 120. I think that's closer to the number he wanted, which we talked about with you yesterday. You'd be happy in that like 125 range. Yeah. I think it affects Nebraska more than most.
I don't know enough about the depth of the rosters in terms of practice formats for other teams.
Fair.
But
it does affect Nebraska, though.
I mean, from a developmental standpoint, sure. The way that they like to practice.
Yeah.
I think those numbers will definitely matter, but they'll adjust. You maybe come down about, 10 bodies per station.
Mm-hmm.
8 bodies per station, roughly in my head. I need Jamie for my math. Okay. So yes, to some degree, but they'll have a much better chance to hit their philosophy though too, which is to bring the bottom closer to the middle and the middle closer to the top.
For sure. That's totally fair. I was thinking about it from the kind of the stations they like to run standpoint, right?
Yeah.
Because if they're running 150 guys right now, that's what, 50 guys per station. If you're running 105 guys, it's 34 guys a station.
If 150 is the number,
right? Yeah.
It's a little high.
I do wonder if they're going to find some sort of loophole. like a way around, like a club version, like a club practice
You gotta think
squad
it's coming.
or a JV squad or something, right? Where it's like, oh no, they're not on the roster. They just like to hang out with us.
Yeah, it's not like they're putting pen to paper either.
Right.
But I guess from a budgetary standpoint, depends, man. You having audits or
I mean,
there have to be some to some degree.
Oh, 100%. Because like we talked about a couple days ago, all this stuff is going to end up falling under Title IX. So there's definitely going to be audits to make sure that everything's equitable. It's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out, but it'll be interesting. I would like to see, and I don't know who. Maybe let's go talk to somebody about this after this. Let's just make Big Ten media days a little bit better. We can do better.
Get right on that. Well, I think it started. I mean, just compare the opening statements from Tuesday between Petiti and Sankey.
Yeah, 100%. It was the tone.
Now, full disclosure, I do think Petiti's had better days
than he did Tuesday.
100%.
That's fair. But the contrast was pretty stark.
Yeah, with the cards and that he's had better days, so I know he's capable. It's just if you do the immediate compare and contrast, it's like you start to kind of get it if it starts at the top.
My question is, has Deshaun Foster had any better days?
Oh, that was tough.
That was a tough.
I'm pretty sure I jinxed him because I said multiple times.
You're excited.
I was excited to hear Deshaun Foster. I said, but I did say
you didn't know what you were going to get.
The only thing I was a little nervous about is he was up first.
Yeah.
And he was probably fairly nervous as well.
Yeah, we did learn some stuff though from Deshaun Foster.
Mm-hmm.
Like UCLA is in Los Angeles, as is USC.
Came in pairs,
which is good to we came with another one. There's two of us.
It felt like you were counting your friends.
Nah, then there'd be six of them.
Yeah, there's six of us.
Not like they all
6, 8. What?
Not like it's not like Cal and Stanford.
What?
That was one of the most awkward things that I've seen in a while. And I'm not sure it matters, but it doesn't look great.
Yeah, well, I don't know how their market is, but it took us a long time to recover from opening statement gate.
Yeah.
And I thought that was kind of petty.
For sure. Part of the reason that felt petty was where we were at in the Scott Frost experience by that point. Like it felt like we were sort of just piling on, which we probably were. And, not that I have any history of piling on to stuff. I wouldn't want.
No, that's not my style.
But I just do not understand. Like, you have to give an opening statement, right?
So now they just announce it.
Yeah.
It is kind of different because they used to give you the
kind of the option.
Yeah,
most people
would you like to make an opening statement?
Yeah. Where now it's like, hey,
they'll start with an opening statement,
and then they'll take questions.
Yeah.
So I just like, if you're not, and because he kind of, Deshaun Foster came out later and goes, I'm not a big talking guy, whatever. It's like, okay, well, note cards exist.
No, I see.
iPhones, iPads.
I'm not doing that because I think, I don't know. I go back to one of my old boss. He's a good friend of this day. I was with two guys, Alan Murrow and Jay Noddle.
Mm-hmm.
We were just kind of shooting the breeze. It was after a sporting event. We were sitting down talking about life, this, that, and the other, and we talked about public speaking. And both of them said, if you can command the ability to speak publicly, you're in the top 5% of folks that do business in the United States.
In any field. Yeah.
And I was like, the whole public speaking thing, I think I can handle it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, so I know it's not easy. It's not.
That's why I'm giving some grace. If that's not a strength of yours, give yourself a crutch. I think you're better. I mean, me personally, I think
because I don't. If you already struggle to communicate to large groups or first time or jitters or whatever, I'm not so sure notes always help because there's an art to reading and talking. It is definitely a skill. It's not something that's like, oh, if I forget, I can go back to it. There's something to glancing, talking. Go back and watch Petiti's opening statement.
No, I know what you're talking about. I do. But my argument is it worse to be awkward reading a card or to just freeze and act like people from the Midwest don't know where Los Angeles is?
Yeah.
Like that's my argument. It's like I get that it can look
I'm just not
awkward.
sure that note cards trump the nerves, because
Maybe they don't.
because how would note cards help you understand that people are aware of where UCLA is?
No, you're right. My only thought is if you got note cards, like worst case scenario, you can be awkward, but you can just read your opening statement.
Maybe he wouldn't have addressed that UCLA. Somebody could have just said, hey, let's just assume we're in Indianapolis. We're not in.
Yeah.
Where would you be if you didn't know that UCLA is in Los Angeles and you're following?
Definitely a different country.
So still in the United States, though. Not in the United States.
Yeah, different country means not in the United States. So I would guess somewhere like Nepal. Like if you're in Nepal giving a press conference, maybe
okay, Brad, puke face, eat off turtle shell.
Maybe you're just like, hey,
I want the knife.
You go UCLA. Like the LA is in the name.
Not just gonna gloss over the Golden Child's reference if you're gonna go Nepal. Viva Nepal!
I am gonna gloss over it actually.
It's a fantastic movie.
I've never seen it. I don't even know what you're talking about. That's why I'm glossing over it. I have no idea what you're talking about.
No. Ignorance is bliss.
That's the story of my life. Coming up on the show today, we are going to have Adam McClintock, college football professor, at 8. Got Brian Edwards at 8:30. Got our Ben Scott interview at 8:45. We got Michael Bruntz at 9, and then we will wrap up the show with our Ty Robinson interview at 9:45. This is Hurrdat Sports Radio. Welcome back to Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. I'm Ravi Lulla, DB here with me live from Indianapolis, but our guy Shano's back in Omaha at the Pillar Exterior Stage. One of the things I appreciate about Rule is he says, we often call it saying the quiet part out loud, but he says things that he knows people can use to keep him accountable. Like he says things like, we're going to be great on defense. We're going to make a big jump on offense. How many times yesterday did you hear him say, we're going to be good. We're going to be a really good team. I think we've got a really good team.
Or when he casually just says, when we make a bowl game,
we'll have 30 guys that have graduated.
Yeah.
But that part wasn't even the point. The bowl game wasn't the point. He's just like, yeah, once
he's casually wove that on in. Just like, wait a minute, we're going to a bowl game?
He's talking to his graduates.
Will I not have Christmas at home?
God, I hope not. No offense to your family, but
wow. It's all right.
Maybe they'll be playing the Bolts after Christmas.
2 of us will be there.
Who?
Out of my family.
Oh, yeah. I don't know, man.
I mean,
I was like, I'm not going.
It's about as bad as my out of the country question.
Oh, so like in the U.S.?
I'm glad you crack you up. Here we go.
No, but he is. There's a lot of guys, a lot of coaches especially, that try not to get pinned down with anything, right? They want they're like you claim I am. They're a little slippery.
How about how he didn't even pass up? He didn't even bat an eye with our GPA lady.
Yeah.
To
round 2,
deflect the compliment and not pit it against the other coaches as if to.
Because she did.
Oh yeah. Hey, she said it twice.
You're the only coach.
Twice.
Which is now the number of years that she's put Coach Rule in that position.
And he's like, hey, I'm sure. Well, I count backwards. Count the fingers that are down.
It's like, so out of the country. Just.
And he's like, hey, I'm sure my colleagues, our peers, the other coaches, they're proud of their team's accomplishments too.
Yeah, academic accomplishments. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's just like he's just so gracious in bringing in everybody else to the fold.
Well, what did he say when he was with us? He talked about how he doesn't like to talk down about people. He doesn't like to say things that aren't kind about people. I don't remember his exact words, but that was the gist of it, right? And that's a great example of it, because if he hadn't addressed...
Did anybody else welcome the other teams to the Big Ten that was a coach?
I don't think so. Not that I heard.
It was in his opening statement.
It's the first thing he said, wasn't it?
It's like, wow.
It was the first thing he said. And it's little stuff, right? If he doesn't say that, nobody notices, right? Nobody notices they didn't congratulate the other 4 teams. If he doesn't say that, I'm sure the other coaches care about their academic progress as well.
He has mastered the art of being disarming.
Yes, because immediately it goes from, okay, like where's she going with this question, to, oh, we're going to get a good coach rule answer out of this, right? But it's not so much that he just doesn't say things that talk down to people. He actively gives answers to make sure nobody else is talking down about people either. Like, that's why he's a good leader. One of the reasons, there's a lot, but that's one of the reasons he's a good leader, because he won't even let other people's minds go to a place that they naturally might go if it means it might reflect poorly on others.
Yeah, 100%. I just think, and Giff kind of slid this in, and our listening audience will hear it later on from Ty and Ben Scott. It's modeled behavior, because you can't hear what those guys will talk about when they talk about camaraderie and lifting other guys up, and the young guys, and how they get excited about talking about rotations. Like, pay attention to that.
Those are guys you're talking about.
Those are 2 starters.
Yeah.
That are getting giddy about talking about rotations,
which means giving up some of their snaps.
You can't,
like, I can't put too fine a point on that.
Yeah, those things just don't roll freely off the tongue.
Yes.
Unless that's what's natural to you.
Yeah, unless that
being
is
other-centered.
And
I care about you because we're moving in the same direction. I care about you because you're a human. I care about you because you're my teammate.
And I care about you because I care about Nebraska. You heard that too.
Well, what did he say in his opening statement? The teams that stay together and the coaches who keeps their staffs together will have the best opportunity to have success moving forward.
We've kind of
the message is always consistent.
Yes.
Regardless of the words that he's using, right? You know the landing strip he's trying to get that plane on.
What did he tell us last year, right? He's like, you're going to get sick of me because he's going to tell you the same thing over and over again.
I told you, I think that, I don't even know if I said this on air privately to you, after like the 4th time. It was on a weekend. It's that Sunday that we shot down there. And this was early. This was probably like month 3 or 4, maybe. And I talked to him about our styles. We have a couple. He brought it to my attention that he felt like, well, don't just give me again. He deflected a compliment. He said we have a couple of things in common. Where he said, I know you're obviously a quick blinker, and you bring other people in, right? Like, that's one of the things that drew my wife to Bending Bites when we first got here. And I said, oh, I said that's whatever. I can't remember how I explained where it came from. And he said, the thing about that is I believe in it. So you'll always hear me address it because it's who I am. I don't have to give it pause or thought. And he said, you won't be saying that in 5 years, because in 5 years, I'll be saying the exact same thing that I'm saying today.
Yep.
And you're going to be like, oh, that's not that novel. But I can, and I knew what he was saying, right? But that is the essence and the core of who he is. But I can't tell you how inviting that is.
Oh, yeah.
Because it just leaves you wanting more. And then I complimented that with saying he has this uncanny ability to let you know he's capable of walking away at any time. But that's what gives you the sense that, oh yeah, he's all in.
Yeah. Because he's like, I could choose to walk away and I'm not.
And it's your individual choice.
Yeah.
I care.
Well, and he was talking about that yesterday we were talking about the players returning, right? Where he goes, hey, you have to let it be their decision, whether it's recruits, whether it's guys coming back to the team.
How about how Giff straightened up in his seat when he talked about coming back?
Oh yeah. That was a cool.
Oh yeah.
But there was a going back to Rule for a second here. It kind of reminds me, you've talked about Tony White's defense, right? And how, okay, you've got year 1 under the belt, and like, yeah, it's the same defense, but there's going to be new wrinkles, new adjustments, things like that.
He again lit up when I talked about that, because I was like, yeah, hey, year 1, like, film is out, but so are adjustments and building on it. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he loves the little nuances. He knows that other teams know what they like to do.
And now they're going to be able to build on that.
Punch, counter punch.
And I think when we're talking about Rule and the way he relays his message, I look at it the same way, because to me, he might always have the same themes, but he talks about it in different ways.
Yeah.
We start off with the foundation. We start off with the 3-3-5, right? And then he builds nuance and counters and he adjustments and things like that based on what's going on. So he may be talking about the same thing 5 years from now. I don't think it's going to sound the same.
Yeah, he'll build on it.
He's going to make us work a little bit to get to the same point, because he knows, hey, we've set the foundation here of what we're about.
It won't be like, it won't be Kipling. It'll be like Nietzsche, or
you never know. You never know. Maybe we're going to get a little Bhagavad Gita in there too. It's all on the table.
I ordered that once. It didn't sit well.
Well, did you order the English version or Sanskrit? Because that might be tough to digest for you.
I think it was Sanskrit.
Yeah, that's not a lot of people in the world are reading that still. So you might have to find an expert. That's DB. I'm Ravi. Lulla. We'll wrap up hour number 1 here next on Hurrdat Sports Radio. Wrapping up hour number 1 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. That's DB. I'm Ravi Lulla, live from Lucas Oil Stadium here in Indianapolis. And, that clip from Gifford kind of reminds me of a couple of things we've heard from Rule. So, Rule got into town a little bit early so he could do the Pat McAfee show. And he said something to McAfee that he had kind of said to Joel Klatt as well about the transfer portal, and how he just doesn't like using it to get rid of guys.
Mm-hmm.
He'll use it to fill holes here and there if he needs to. But he kind of even went further with McAfee yesterday with talking about, hey, if I've got this guy or these guys that have been in the program for 3 years, I don't want to bring in some guy to start over them just because he's getting more NIL money, right? And it kind of reminded me what Giff was saying there about he's not seeing guys leave, right? He's not seeing guys that are leaving the program, and part of that's on the guy's decision, right? But part of that, especially in college football today, is on the coaching staff and how they want to manage their roster. A lot of those guys aren't interested in managing a roster of 150 guys. And so we see them, what's the old term, process guys out of the program. And Coach Rule said it on McAfee on Tuesday. He goes, hey, if a guy came to play for me and he's doing all the things I ask him to do, there's going to be a place for him here. And I think when you receive that type of loyalty from the head coach, now a lot of it has to do with your recruiting philosophy and making sure guys are good fits, but I also think it goes a long way to get that kind of loyalty return from the players as well.
Yeah. So I think the key to that is you have to be willing and pretty secure on the front end. If you're the receiver or you're the decision maker, you got to be willing to invest in other people, knowing you may not get that back.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's number one. And we're so dismissive of that, right? We don't even take chances within our own families because of how it may be received.
Mm-hmm.
Just imagine people that you haven't spent an inordinate amount of time around, but that's really the only way you can get things accomplished.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? It's like you have to make some sort of emotional risk of connection to get the desired outcome.
Well, and that's why one of the reasons he said he doesn't love getting guys out of the portal, right? Is he's like, you get to maybe talk to a guy for a week, and then you have to make a decision on whether you want to bring him in or not. It's really hard to build that relationship when, he used 6 months as the time frame for a recruit, but most of the time we're talking 2 or 3 years now. Yeah. You get to know a guy for 2 or 3 years before he steps on campus if you're recruiting him out of high school. And if you run your program the way Coach Rule does, and it's about relationships and it's about development, it's about all those things, then you're better off getting a guy that you feel like you really know who he is.
Are you amazed? Sounds about right. Pretty impressive. Maybe not like you think, DB. When I say this to you, do you look at the roster in just year 2 in 2024 going into this season and can already see where he's gotten to the point where he would just need to fill holes?
100%.
Crazy, isn't it?
I look at this roster and
is that not incredible?
No, it's insane. It's nuts. What did we think about the roster at this time last year before we saw them play? Offensive line,
I know.
Disaster.
I know.
Running back room, don't know what we have there. Quarterbacks, okay.
No, quarterbacks wasn't okay last year.
No,
You're
but-
being kind.
Fair.
We looked at the room and we were like, I don't know I hope they don't.
Yes.
If they run him too much, he could get hurt. I mean, yeah,
You're right.
we weren't cool.
I was being overly kind there. So we didn't love the quarterbacks. We didn't love the
Wide
running
receiver
backs.
room, we were like, oh, they can't have to play freshman. They're gonna need one of those guys to play. This is
a disaster.
Yeah.
We're like, okay, so what? Is IGC is going to be a big part of
it's
it?
And a year later,
the only place we're saying that about is like, I don't know about the depth in the secondary. That's about it.
Corner maybe.
Yeah, corner. I don't know about.
But then if you get guys like Tarver or Sanders or Charles or some of these young guys, and they can have some success, it's like,
oh, that question's answered.
Yeah, then next year we may need to get one veteran corner,
maybe,
right, or something like that. Yeah. It's just amazing.
And we didn't even talk about the defensive line. I was one of the only people after spring last year that liked the defensive line, and everybody else goes, "Oh, I don't know about the defensive line." And fair enough, I was counting on freshmen to be good, and because of what I saw in the spring game. But defensive line we didn't like, offensive line we didn't like, quarterback we didn't like. If you don't like those three spots, you're in a bad way in any football.
I just
at any level.
And I wonder what everybody's, and I don't go by what you said. Certainly they probably don't, but don't go by what we say. If we feel like you're in a position where you're just filling holes, go back and give yourself even at first blush 3 deep. And you're like, okay, I could see some concerns maybe here in this position or this spot, but man, this kind of sets up nice.
The only other one is I don't know if we've got that guy at running back, right? That's the only one.
That's going to be your thing,
I think that's how a lot of people feel.
That's fine. That doesn't make them right.
No, but I mean, we're talking about the perception of the roster, so we are talking about what people think, right?
To some degree, because the problem with that is other people can talk about depth and things like that, but we act like guys can't get better.
For sure.
But we do that with every other position.
Yeah, that's fair.
But we look at running backs and it's like,
and that position could be. I mean, I think it'll be fine. I'm not concerned about it.
It's just weird that one got singled out. It's like you're operating on best case scenario for a lot of positions.
Sure, I mean quarterback included, right? I mean probably not best case scenario, but you're operating on a good outcome of an unknown at quarterback. And the only reason I single out running back is because that's the only other place that I look at and go, I'm not. But there's plenty of guys there, right? There's depth, especially with Mekhi Nelson being reclassifying into 2024. I feel fine about the depth at running back, and I honestly feel fine about the guys. I'm not like super jazzed up about any of those guys. I think they could all be good. I don't think you're going to look and be like, oh, this guy ends up being special, right? But if they're all pretty good.
I love how we fast forward to the extreme. How about just being good?
Yeah, if they're all pretty good, then that's great for Nebraska. That's all they need.
I'd like for a lot of guys to be special.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
Just give me 7. Like 80% of college football.
Yeah.
A lot of 7s.
100%. Well, and that's kind of the thing, right? To get to 8 wins, if you could do that with 7s. A bunch of guys being 7 out of 10, 6 to 7 out of 10, get you to 8 wins, right? Like that's not. But I think the reason where I go to special with running backs is because I do think there are guys at almost every other position that can be special. So that's why I make the distinction there, because I look at obviously quarterback. How I feel about Dylan. I think there's guys at wide receiver that can be special. I think there's guys on the offensive line that can be special or are turning into special players. Defensive line, you already know how I feel there. Linebackers, I think there's guys that can be special there. Same thing with the secondary. I think there's guys that either can be or already are special there. So that's why I make that distinction with running back, is because the standard at all the other positions for me is guys that have the upside to be special. And maybe I'm just too down on the running back. That's totally on the table. But that's why I go to that extreme, because I have mentally, I'm like, I think there's that upside at every other position group.
Yeah. I like the fact that we don't really know the relationship between good offensive lines and how good
Sure.
a running back needs to be.
100%.
Running back is just the one position I feel like we know exactly what we're looking at if somebody's a set apart.
Sure.
We don't really know the range of good backs.
That's fair.
But we do know if we see one that we think is special.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
I think that's fair. I think you can be really good.
Do we do that with any other position?
I would say
you know who doesn't really get that distinction?
Who?
Wide receivers.
Probably not, no.
So because they can look so much different. What's the physical attributes? What's the difference between Stephon Diggs, Antonio Brown, and Randy Moss?
A lot of different physical attributes there. Wide variety.
Look at their top 3 years between the three of them.
Probably about the same.
About very, very, very similar.
Wide receivers can come in all shapes and sizes.
I mean, for 6 years, Antonio Brown was
best receiver in the league.
Incredible.
He was the best receiver in the league for 6 years.
And it's not like if you're making a guy in the lab
that you would come up with.
You're coming up with Antonio Brown.
Not even a little bit.
Right?
Right.
But the minute we go to running back, we figure we know what we want to get.
Though it's not about body size, it's just looking at him, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But I feel that way. I think the only one that I came up with just off the top of my head.
We don't do it with quarterback.
No, I do it, I think, with pass rushers.
Do you?
I think if there's I think the pass rusher, like I'll look at a guy and be like, oh, he's different. Like he's special. Versus the guy that's like, oh, he's gonna get good pressure. That I do make that distinction with pass rushers. But you're right, we don't do it most spots.
Yeah, I'm curious. So Garrett, Khalil Mack and his prime.
Parsons. I see it with Parsons. He may not be good at much else, but in pass rushing, that'll get it done.
Yeah, I keep hearing people say he's not good against the run.
I mean,
I don't know, man.
I wouldn't call him special against the run. I'm not saying he's not good against the run.
I'll go back and watch tape.
But when he's rushing,
I'd run at that guy. Okay.
When he's rushing passer, it looks different. Coming up next, we got Adam McClintock. He's a college football professor from Matrix Analytical here on Hurrdat Sports Radio. Welcome back to Hurrdat Sports Radio, kicking off hour number 2 here on AM 590 ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. That's DB. I'm Ravi Lulla. We are joined now by Adam McClintock. He's the college football professor for Matrix Analytical. What's up, Adam?
What's up, guys? How are you doing?
We're good, man. How about you? Besides, I felt bad because you tweeted it out a couple of days earlier, so it shouldn't have been such shock value, but I referenced it a couple of days ago, and then the buzz started again, man. How many times did you have to say, it's just a model? It's just a model, guys.
Well, it a lot because people.
But there were some gaudy numbers.
Yeah, I know. USC being one of them. That's right.
Yeah, that started the whole meltdown. I was like, hey, man, don't kill the messenger. I just was saying, like, I was like, it was a high double-digit total. I can't remember. Was it 11? It was even worse than that. It was 12. But when I listened to Lincoln yesterday, were you more on he's a little defensive and having to defend, or quietly he's doing that because he thinks they're going to be pretty good? He would say things like, people that know the program, people that actually know what they're talking about. Like, there were a couple, that's what you get when you coach at USC. There were just a couple of those where I was like, ooh, this is going to be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, you get the sense that people are treating USC kind of like they're going to be a mid-tier program coming in just because they had a rough year last year. I don't think that's the case. I think that's why Lincoln Riley was a little, it's got his feathers ruffled a little bit yesterday at times.
Did you get that, or am I speaking that into existence? Did you feel like that when he was done talking?
No, I felt like he had to keep reminding people that, hey, this is USC. You're not a program. This is USC, and that whole conversation was fascinating to me because this is one of the premier programs in college football coming in, and I felt like he had to keep reminding people of that. I mean, it's
how much of that, Adam, do you think has to do with the fact people feel like he ducked the SEC?
I mean, there's probably a little bit of that, maybe, but it's hard to say. But yeah, there's probably a little bit of that. That along with just how bad the defense was last year and how much opportunity there was for USC to be good last year with a talent like Caleb Williams, and they didn't come through with it. But man, I'll tell you what, he sure seemed like he had to keep pounding that narrative that, hey, we're at the top of any conference we come into, guys. We're still USC.
I left when he was done at the podium. I felt like he's going to be the insta villain. I did. I'm like, ooh, if folks got to stand on one side of the aisle or the other, like judging that, I think Lanning's probably like, whew, thank you, thank you, Lincoln, for that, because I won't be near. It just seemed like his stance was the most defensive of the bunch up to this point.
Yeah, you're right. And, Lanning hasn't spoken yet, so let's not get ahead of ourselves.
Yeah, I know. Because he's very capable, but for different reasons. It's more his bravado.
And with Oregon, I don't think anybody will bat an eye because everybody expects Oregon to be great.
Well, that's interesting. Do you expect Oregon to be great, Adam?
I do. I have Oregon the model has Oregon win 11 games. It does not have them playing in the Big Ten championship, though. Like we've talked before, that's USC and Ohio State playing in that championship game this year, according to the model. So that would be an interesting development because Oregon, does not play USC, so there's no chance for them to remedy that. And the model actually has Oregon as being the better team. Oregon just has the misfortune of having to play Ohio State. And, according to conference tiebreakers with an 18-team conference, that would make USC and Ohio State the two that would belong for the Big Ten championship game.
Adam, so let me ask you this, because I know these models do have kind of some variance in them in the sense of, you've got different confidence levels on certain model predictions than others. My guess would have been, and I know there's some like real volatility in some of these ones, right? And we'll get to one of them because it's a team that DB is kind of higher on than most. But is there I would have assumed that there would have been some volatility in the USC number. Is that what you're seeing from the model, or are you pretty dead steady on that one?
Well, the model's pretty dead set on it. I mean, there's not a whole lot of toss-up games in there. It's got a. And first, let me back up. A toss-up game, according to the model, is any game within, I think it's 4 points. Okay, the projection in a 4-point spread. The only game it has within a 4-point spread is the first game at LSU. The rest of them, at Michigan, it's got them winning by 7. It has them beating Penn State by 5. It's got them, beating Notre Dame by 5. And I have a lot of problems sometimes looking and seeing what the model sees. But you look at the schedule that USC received for the Big Ten, and it's not that daunting. They get Wisconsin at home, all right? They go to Michigan, but Michigan I don't believe is going to be the same team as they were last year. They get Notre Dame at home, they get Nebraska at home, they get Rutgers at home. I mean, other than that, they play at Minnesota, at Washington, at Maryland. This is a pretty favorable Big Ten schedule for USC. So while 12 wins was a shock to me when I saw the numbers come out, when I did this, but if you squint hard enough and you understand that, hey, he did revamp that defensive staff with D'Anton Lynn and Ince as linebackers coach and Hendrickson as the defensive line coach. Those are 3 big hires he made. Also brought in half of UCLA's secondary from last year to revamp that defensive secondary. You squint a little bit, and I can see maybe how they can get to double-digit wins. 12 might be pushing it, just from my personal opinion, but but it's not off the realm of possibility.
So you brought up a team there that I wanted to talk about because I know DB's high on them, a little higher than I am on them, but Rutgers. That's a team that is kind of all over the place with some people, and you were kind enough to share some of your projections with us. It looked like they were all over the place on your projections too.
Yeah, that one, the way my model works is it spits out the most likely projected overall record, and for Rutgers that's 5-7. But also, gives you a record ceiling and a record floor. And the ceiling and floor for Rutgers is that goalpost is so wide. It has them anywhere between 9-3 and 3-9 as the possibilities there. They have 6 toss-up games, which remember I said toss-up.
That's a lot.
4 points. So that depending on how that ball bounces and Greg Schiano, that's the type of game he wants, right?
Mm-hmm.
He wants to get a phone booth and he wants that game to be close and get it into the fourth quarter and try to win close. So if that's the case, then maybe it tips a little further towards that 9-3 than that 3-9. But that is a team that has a lot of possibility. But there is a lot of volatility in their schedule as well.
Talk to me about Penn State. We kind of walk through perception versus reality when we were talking about kind of moods that coaches would arrive to Indianapolis in. How do you feel about James Franklin's track record? We pitted against recruiting, which wasn't as high as I thought, especially over the last 6 years, like their composite, versus the results, which have been pretty doggone good.
No, I completely agree with you there. I mean, he's got the roster talent at Penn State is 14th. Okay, so that's good, but that's not superb. He's winning 10 wins a game, 10 wins a year.
Yeah.
With that roster talent, that's about what's expected to be with that amount of roster talent. How many teams, how many coaches are beating Ohio State and Michigan on a consistent basis? With roster talents worse than Michigan, Ohio State. It doesn't happen. So people are expecting James Franklin to do what a lot of coaches across the country wouldn't be able to do. So I think he's doing a fine job at Penn State. I don't get the criticism of James Franklin. I think he's fine, with what he's doing. Now I get that doesn't probably sit well with people in State College, but the reality is where their roster talent's at, he's doing exactly what he should do.
We're talking with Adam McClintock, college football professor from Matrix Analytical. Let's hop to Nebraska here because I'm looking at the model and the projection you have for them. You're right in the neighborhood of where I've been all year, which is I've got them at 8-4. Which is right where you've got them as well. And your model seems pretty confident in that number.
Yeah, it's pretty stuck on 8-4. There's I think it has a 33% chance of them landing on that record. So that also is the record floor for Nebraska is 8-4. So with that in mind, the question everybody wanted to ask yesterday and the Bill Moose question from a couple of years ago was what should be expected out of the season? Well, the model says 8-4 is what should be expected out of Nebraska this year with a possibility at 9-3. So they have one toss-up game against Wisconsin. The rest are pretty set in stone. The Ohio State game looks pretty tough. And then at USC looks to be pretty tough. But the rest of the games are pretty set in stone and how they should go.
How about, were you shocked? Because I want to go to Iowa, because, of course, Ravi's been banging this drum forever. He drove up the win total. I think you don't feel like it's high enough. But then looking at the model, Iowa, according to the model, has 0 toss-up games.
That's exactly right. I don't think people are talking enough about the Tim Lester hire at Iowa. That was now I know that wasn't a front of the mind name in many households in college football, but Tim Lester put together some really good offenses at Western Michigan while he was there. The last one the last couple he had there weren't spectacular, but his offensive acumen is not poor. I mean, that was a good hire by Iowa. He's going to fit what Iowa wants to do, and he's going to fit well with Phil Parker and with LeVar Woods and the style that they want to play football. If they can move the ball this year with Tim Lester and with some of the guys they have coming back from injury last year, nobody's going to score on that defense this year, or it's going to be very, very, very difficult to do so. Not only that, but LeVar Woods always has that special teams tuned up to where they're going to be gaining possession, gaining yards every punt, every change of possession that isn't a turnover. So
I was shocked. He wasn't as comfortable, and maybe it was his son or how the whole thing kind of unfolded last year or the last year and a half before Brian left Iowa City. He didn't seem like his normal, comfortable self fielding the offensive questions yesterday. Am I reading too much into that, do you think?
Well, it just kind of depends on how much say did he have in the offense last year when Brian was there, and how much has Tim taken over and said, no, this is my offense, this is what I'm going to do. I would venture to say that a guy like Kirk Ferentz is always going to have a say in how the offense goes, to some degree. But I think maybe he has less control of what's going on there than he has in the past, and maybe that's where his discomfort is coming from a little bit. I missed that interview yesterday, or his interview the other day, so I'm not familiar with what you're talking about, but that might have a little bit to do with it. That and there has been some some rough off seasons of late at Iowa, and they do have a new AD, so that could be adding to the discomfort a little bit as well.
Adam, sticking on Iowa for a second here. You're talking about those toss-up games. They've got 0 of them. They've only got 2 games where your projected point spread is under double digits, and they've only got 1 where it's under a touchdown. Like, this is about, as I'm figuring out how your models work and stuff, this looks like about as like rock solid of a projection as you can get, which makes me feel great because I've been banging the drum on 10 wins as a lock for this team, and you've got them at a 11-1, no questions asked.
Exactly, and like a lot like USC, their schedule played out pretty well for them as well. They miss Penn State, they miss Michigan. They do have to go to Ohio State, but other than that, they get Wisconsin at home, they get Nebraska at home, they go to UCLA, who's going to be in a rebuild. They go to Michigan State, who's going to be in a rebuild, and they go to Minnesota, who is not maybe the Minnesota we've seen of the past 3 or 4 years.
I think they're in trouble.
Yeah, Minnesota, they're listing a little bit, aren't they? That boat's showing some leaks, so we'll see how that goes going forward. But it's not the Minnesota of the last 3 or 4 years. So the only game on here that I see could be a little bit more of a challenge than what this is showing is maybe at Maryland. Maryland's always kind of a team I kind of look at, and I know they're losing their quarterback, but Loxley has been a good quarterback coach in the past, a good quarterback developer. So we'll see what Maryland fields this year. But Iowa's schedule, it sets up perfectly for them to win double digits and get to 11-win mark.
Let me give you 2 more. They both don the purple. One's in Evanston, and the other is up there towards that Seattle area. Let me start with Washington. Obviously, I felt like they made as good a hire as they could in Fish. I mean, rumor has it, with he in the relationship, he almost got John Butler. If you listen to some in the coaching circles, before Coach Rule was able to snag him because of their past relationship. What do the models tell you about Washington?
Washington lost a lot of production off of their team. They're 133rd in the country in offensive returning production. That's a hit. They're 91st in the country in defensive returning production. That's a massive hit. So basically, Jed Fish is coming in there, new coaching staff, basically a new overturned roster, going into a new conference, playing against new teams week in and week out. It could be a humbling year in Seattle.
The schedule doesn't look crazy though. Northwestern's at home. They're at Rutgers. They get Michigan at home. They're at Iowa, at Indiana. They get SC at home. They do have to go to Penn State, but I don't look at it and I'm like, but you're right. If you don't have much to work with, maybe that's more the issue.
Exactly. And it doesn't have it doesn't have them losing all their games or anything in that realm. It has them going 5-7 with a chance to get to 7-5. But I mean, you look at the games that they do have out of the Big Ten. They got to go. They have Northwestern at home, which the model shows that as being a win. They have to go to Rutgers, fly cross country to Rutgers. Okay, that's gonna be a tough game for them to win.
Yeah.
They have Michigan at home. That's going to be a tough game for them to win. They go to Iowa, which is going to be a tough game for them to win. At Indiana, which this has them losing that as a toss-up game because that's another team that people aren't talking a lot about.
I'm going to try to sneak in Cignetti after Northwestern.
Okay, yeah, that's a good coaching staff, but we'll get to that. USC, Penn State, UCLA, Oregon are their final four. That's just a tough. I mean, it's not an overly unmanageable schedule for them, but it's just a tough the way it sets up, and just being a new roster, a new coaching staff, and a new team, a new conference, it's just not going to bode well for them.
Talk to me about Northwestern.
Northwestern, I think
considering he could have been coach of the year last year,
he should have been. I mean,
I agree.
Braun was a very highly thought of FCS coordinator in our system. He had wonderful defensive coordinator. He came in and we loved that hire as a defensive coordinator. But when he became head coach, we were like, oh boy, how could this go? This could be rough. Being in the Big Ten, first head coaching position at somewhere like Northwestern, and he scratched and clawed his way to a bowl game. I mean, that's with a staff that never necessarily wasn't his. So that was tremendous. Now, the model doesn't see them doing quite as well this year. It has them going 2-10. There's a crash back to reality here for Northwestern, but a coach like that who's proved that he can do that once. I don't put it past him to do it again and maybe scratch out a few more wins than what they're showing.
And then I know DB wanted to talk about, and I know you're very high on Curt Cignetti. He was, I believe, your highest rated coach last year. You loved that hire for Indiana. How does your model treat him this year in year one?
Oh, it loves Curt Cignetti and that whole hire. It actually has Indiana going 7-5 with a chance to get to 9-3. So when he said that he was going to come out and win the Big Ten, everybody laughed and hawed about it. Maybe winning the Big Ten's a little lofty, but don't be.
I'm definitely not excited to go there. I can tell you that right now. I'm on record.
Exactly. That staff he brought from James Madison. Those guys know how to coach and at a high level. They'll fit in quite well in a Shark Tank of a Big Ten as far as coaching staff. So Indiana is not going to be a pushover. That's going to be a game you're going to have to go in there and you're going to have to bring the smelling salts because it's going to be a football game.
All right, last one for me, Adam, before we get you out of here. I got to ask about Illinois. I'm spending some time in Champaign later today. There's a ton of variance on that one, too. Your model's got them at 6-6, but the ceiling and floor are pretty far apart.
Yeah, that's another one where, it's the goalposts are really wide. 8-4 is the ceiling, 3 and 9 is the floor. There's been a little bit of staff, churn their last couple of years, but they still have a really, really good staff, a top 30 staff. Brett Bielema, he's a guy who knows the Big Ten. He knows how to win the Big Ten, but that was the old Big Ten. Does that still fly now with teams like USC and Oregon and those teams coming in and kind of changing the way maybe the game is played in the conference? We'll see. I think they'll land around 6-6 or 7-5 this year. I don't think there'll be a repeat of them from last year, not going bowling.
That's Adam McClintock, college
So
football
good.
professor. Always great stuff, Adam. We appreciate your time as always and for sharing so much of your information with us. It's incredible.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. You guys have a good one.
You got it.
That's Adam McClintock, college football professor from Matrix Analytical. Coming up next, we will have more Hurrdat Sports Radio live from Indianapolis. Here we are back on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. We're live on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. That's TB. I'm Ravi Lulla. We are joined now by our guy, Brian Edwards, Vegas Insider. What's up, B?
Good morning. Where are you guys? Chicago?
We're in Indianapolis for Big Ten Media Days.
Gotcha.
Yeah. You aren't missing anything, buddy. Don't worry. How about you?
Oh, I'm just in little old Santa Rosa Beach.
The beach. little lifestyles of the handicapping and famous.
Must be tough out there, B. Must be tough.
I tell you what, Memphis and Liberty on the agenda today, huh?
Yeah, and a little bit of Louisville. Did you have enough time to break that one down?
Yeah. I'm ready to go, man. I mean, Memphis and Liberty might be in the CFP later this year.
So that's why I wanted to talk about them. I think Memphis is extremely dangerous, and everybody's on Liberty. So they weren't like, DB just getting in the weeds. I get the Liberty thing, but I want to get people's attention on Memphis here. Let's start with them.
Yeah, and I think Memphis can lose at FSU, especially if it's a competitive game, and be 11-1 and hopefully get in ahead of Liberty, unless Liberty's just mashing teams, all year long, because Liberty plays absolutely nobody. Whereas Memphis, not only do they have to play at FSU, but FSU's got 2 weeks to prepare, and they also, at USF. I mean, USF came on last year. I think they're going to be pretty good. They have to go at UTSA, and they have to go at Tulane. If they sweep those 3 road games, and those 3 teams have, pretty good seasons, like I think most of us are anticipating, and their only losses at FSU. And then this will be another thing for Memphis. They want FSU to win the ACC.
Right, because that strengthens their look.
Absolutely. So I think if Memphis goes 11-1, and those teams I just mentioned, FSU, Tulane, USF, UTSA have pretty good seasons, then I think Memphis, again, as long as Liberty's not beating everybody 61-2, I think Memphis should have probably a better argument than Liberty. Good quarterback Seth Hennigan, 32-9 TDI-NT ratio. He's got his top 2 receivers back. They got 30 transfers out of the portal, 13 Power 4 guys. So I definitely lean over on the 9.5 for Memphis, which I just looked at FanDuel was plus 138 to the over. I don't know what books you guys might have looked at for that price, but I definitely lean over on Memphis and might end up playing it.
So how many toss-up games did you give Memphis?
So I marked them 8-1 with 3 toss-up games. I have them losing to FSU and those 3 road games I mentioned at USF, at UTSA, and at Tulane. Now, I don't think UTSA is going to be as good as they've been the last few years, but admittedly, I haven't really studied them that hard.
So, B, let me ask you this with Memphis versus Liberty here, because I totally understand what you're saying, that their abilities to get better wins are there when Liberties really aren't. Am I not putting enough faith in the committee for them to see UTSA and a win over UTSA and not giving them enough credit that they'll make a distinction over some of the teams on Liberty's schedule and not seeing them as equivalent?
Well, don't we get a new committee every year? So I don't know if it's you, Ravi, not giving them credit. I don't know that any of us are going to give them any credit until we, we see their work. But looking at Liberty's schedule, so flip side for them, I mean, they want App State to win the Sun Belt because that looks like their toughest game at App State. Now, but then, I think Western Kentucky's going to be pretty good, but that game's at home. You would think Liberty would handle that. And maybe Jacksonville, they won 31-13 at Jack State last year, but that's a misleading final. I bet Jack State that game, and I was really, irked that game went sideways because I thought Jack State was in complete control in the first half. But anyway, personnel-wise, first off, Jamie Chadwell, probably the most underrated coach in the country. Liberty brings back 8 starters on defense. They only lost 26 lettermen, 18 transfers, 10 Power 4. But their transfer-specific class was only ranked 91 at 247 Sports. But I don't feel like Jamie Chadwell's recruiting has ever really impressed me, but he just always wins. And he's obviously got a big-time quarterback in Kadon Salter and a big-time running back in Quentin Cooley, who had 1,401 yards rushing last year, 16 touchdowns, 6.3 yards per carry. And Salter ran for over 1,000 yards as well and had a 32-6 TDINT. So, so I marked 9-0 with 3 swing games at App State, Jack State at home in Western Kentucky. But I think they're definitely favored, probably somewhat healthily, in the 2 home games. And at App State, we'll just have to see. I know they've got Aguilar, a really good quarterback. Talking about the Mountaineers.
Yeah, quietly they won 10 a year ago, man. I think Louisville may be a problem, and they will spoil somebody's season in the ACC. What do you say?
Well, can Tyler Shuck stay healthy? I mean, has he? I don't think he's ever stayed healthy an entire season. I mean, he was, a hyped quarterback coming out of high school. But let's see, 14-11 TDINT ratio in 3 years and 13 starts at Texas Tech, 13-6 TDINT ratio in 6 starts at Oregon. Big guy, 6'5", 230. So Louisville, number 38 overall recruiting class per 247 Sports Composite. Number 13, though, in terms of transfer specific, 31 transfers, 5 4-star guys, 8 starters back on offense, 7 on D. The win total 8.5, under -150, over +122. I marked them 6-3 with 3 swing games. I have them losing at Notre Dame, at Clemson, when Clemson's got 2 weeks to prepare, and Louisville is not is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, it's 7th game in 7 weeks. I got them losing at Kentucky, which is either pick 'em or Kentucky -1, but Kentucky's just dominated them 5 years in a row. The swing games, Miami at home, that's another game. Miami and Clemson both get 2 weeks to prepare for Louisville, when Louisville does not have 2 weeks. And I've also got a swing game at Boston College, but that's a short week game. Louisville will definitely be favored. Maybe a little chilly weather late October in Boston. I think Louisville probably wins that game. And then I've got them a swing game, SMU at home, where I think Louisville will be a small favorite. So, they could easily go 2-1 there and be 8-4. I think it's a good number on the total, and I don't want anything to do with it, because what do they have behind Tyler Shuck? Just on the depth chart, I see Pierce Clarkson, actually redshirt freshman, but it looks like he was very highly recruited, and Harrison Bailey, who was at Tennessee many moons ago. I guess he's their third.
How is he still in college?
Right? Didn't he go out west to Colorado maybe before Prime got there?
I got to go back and look at that. That's funny you bring him up. That is not where I figured he landed. That's an incredible pull.
Well, you know what? Florida was up 31-7 in 2020, the COVID year, at Tennessee very late, and they were laying, I believe, anyway, Harrison Bailey threw 2 late fourth quarter touchdown passes, including one on 4th and 10 late in the game for a backdoor cover.
That's
at
incredible.
Neyland. Oh my gosh, it hurt my soul.
Cal, you are a sicko. But I know why. So listening to you, I know why you remember it now, though.
Oh yeah. Oh, I remember like it was yesterday. I know exactly where I was.
Do you like SMU? A lot of people do.
I do, and they took my money in that AAC championship game at Tulane, and man, you know who really likes SMU is Phil Steele. His national unit rankings, I'm trying to find their page, they're ranked a lot higher in Phil Steele than I thought. He has them top 25 every single position group, top 19 if we take away D-line. He's got them 25th D-line, and he's got them top 19 in number 8 at receiver, 15 running back, 10 linebacker, 19 secondary. Phil Steele's very high on SMU.
Ravi just remembered what conference they played in this morning in the opening of the show, so maybe they'll sneak up on everybody.
It takes me every day that I have to remember they're in the ACC.
Hey, if they get FSU at home, that's going to be a tricky one for the Seminoles.
I don't need your hate, B. Like just because you're worried about your coach getting fired, like I don't need to hear it today.
Oh shoot.
I really forget Ravi is the Noel sometimes.
Yeah, well, it's easy to forget.
You know, I'm out of place out here. B, we appreciate it as always. We'll talk to you later.
Thanks, gentlemen. Y'all have a good one.
Thanks, B.
Our interview with Ben Scott coming up next. Welcome back to Hurrdat Sports Radio here on AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. I'm Ravi, Lulla. That's DB. We are joined now by Nebraska offensive lineman Ben Scott. Ben, how are you?
Doing good. How are you?
Man,
you look sharp, man. You like getting dressed up?
It's not really my thing, but I think I look pretty good right now. Not too
Well,
bad.
what are you gonna do for the wedding?
Yeah, true. Jeez.
Congratulations, Sue, by the way.
Appreciate it.
I'll say, is it a summer wedding? When's this happening?
Should be a summer wedding. We're thinking maybe like 2026 though. We're in no rush.
Okay.
Yeah. You wanted her to know that you're pot committed, like you're all in.
Yeah.
I see the way you're working.
Ben, so you made a decision to come back here for another year at Nebraska, which I know people were very excited about, but I kind of want to go back a little bit further and talk about how you got here to Nebraska in the first place. Obviously, you're at Arizona State, decide to transfer, you end up at Nebraska. What was that process like, and what drew you to Nebraska in the first place?
Yeah, my mom is from Columbus, Nebraska. So her and her family really had a big impact on that. They're all Husker fans. I grew up wearing that corn head, watching Husker games as a kid. So, I've always grown up a Husker fan, and especially going into the Big Ten, I think that had a big impact on it too. Playing some real lineman ball, really getting down and dirty in those big personnels. I think that really drew me in.
Yeah, I tell people just watching practices all the time, one of my favorite things about you is you're not a fake tough guy, right? Like some guys they'll give you the illusion that they're about that life. And then when it kind of gets messy and dark in there, a couple pin and pulls and collisions and you get a true nose, it's like, not a fake tough guy. Is that the roots that you're rooted in when you talk about how you were raised, the Columbus salt to the earth? Because that's the thing that sticks out to me probably first. Second is your athleticism for your size, but first it's your toughness.
Yeah, growing up in Hawaii, a lot of those Polynesians, they grow like early. So when I was in like middle school, I was like small, weak, like all you guys look like grown men compared to me. So, like at that age, you really got to learn quick on like how to really go against these guys, So once I kind of caught up to them, it was like, I really have to use this as my advantage, So yeah, I really like growing up in Hawaii really like got me there, and, having playing ball against those Polynesians, man, is different.
So, Ben, let me ask you about your offensive line coach, because I think Donovan Raiola is a guy that sort of fascinates people outside the program because we don't get a lot from him, right, publicly, but it seems like he resonates with you guys at a really high level. Mm-hmm. And I'm just curious, what is he like in the room with you guys that has allowed you to, DB says it all the time, he thinks you guys are the tightest unit on the team.
I do. I
imagine Coach Raiola had something to do with that.
Oh, yeah. He's always holding us accountable. Like, he sets the highest standard for us. And it's important for, like, in his eyes, it's really important for us to always be together. We're always 15 minutes early to every meeting. And that's, like, his doing. Like, he told us, I want to
dress the same. Yeah, it's weird.
We tuck our shirts in for every lift. We're always together, and that's, like, something we got to do because on the field, it's us five, and we got to be together on everything. Play with one set of eyes. We're always making the right calls, and we're starting that in the off season, in the weight room, in the meeting room. So when it comes to season, like, it's already muscle memory.
So from a football standpoint, what is Raiola like? I don't know if it's taught you or helped you learn from, whether it's, people have made a lot about his like knuckles up technique and stuff like that. That seems like it's a little bit different from probably just about everywhere else. Like, what have you been, how's he been able to help you grow as a lineman?
Yeah, his technique is a little bit different, but I think it works. Like if you really like buy into his technique and you're doing it every day, like you can really see a difference on the field. And I think going from year 1 to year 2, I'll really feel that difference in the technique being bought into it. And also his way of like schematically, he's more of an NFL guy, so he's doing it like the guys in the NFL do it. And I think that's really helping me. And it took a little while to transition into that. And I think now I'm really comfortable in doing that, and I think it'll be good.
I tell our listeners over the last year and a half, one of the things that I admire the most about you is it wasn't always smooth sailing early, right? It was very competitive, and Justin Evans, a lot of these guys, you're like, hey, you could have easily said, listen, I transferred here, I'm the guy, I got experience, but you still had to work into it. You just elevated over time, man. How about that initial month and a half early on when you first got here? How much different versus, hey, I'm just kind of learning? Like, what was the balance in that?
Yeah, especially like learning a new technique, learning a new way to do things schematically. That was big. And, having the schedule that we had compared to what I've been having before.
Yeah, walk our listeners through that.
Yeah, at Arizona State, we would go in, like, especially during the summer, we would go in and lift and we were done for the day. That was basically it. In the later part of summer, we'd have OTAs and stuff like how we do here. But it was a lot different. We were in the facility a lot longer, doing a lot more meetings, a lot more film, a lot more drills, and a lot more football stuff. So I think it's honestly good for us doing that. We're getting so much better in the offseason alone that by the time fall camp comes, I think we're going to be so much ready.
Ben, we talked to Ty about this a little bit because that's another unit where you've got some young guys pushing for playing time. You've got some entrenched veterans in that group as well. How do you balance being competitive with one another, but also rooting for those young guys to be successful?
Yeah, it's a job for us too. We're going in there being competitive, but we're also helping the young guys learn and helping them get to where they can be. There's so much potential in all of them, and I think we're going to see a lot of the young guys playing this season. So it'll be important for them to really buy in, and we'll be right there next to them, helping them along the road. So it'll be good.
It's so cool watching you blossom because I'm a big believer, even though I was a running back. I love offensive linemen, but not just because I need help and friends. It's because usually the closer you are to the ball, the better your team is. And when your leadership happens so close to the trenches, like the O-line and the D-line, I'm encouraged as an alum from Nebraska. When you're watching this kind of evolve, where you started, where you've been, what you're expecting this year, how are you kind of managing the emotions until you get there, right? Because you're close, camp's getting ready to open, and I know you guys want to unleash, but you've had to incrementally do the steps along the way. How was that balance?
Yeah, it's been great. I think every day we go in the weight room, we do like hard stuff. So it's really like important to have that chemistry going into the weight room every day. We have
You say that with a smile.
It's a lot of hard stuff in the weight room and on the field doing conditioning. So we're really helping each other along the way, picking them up and really holding them to the standard that needs to be. And, I think it's important doing this early. So then once, fall camp, the first day, everyone's going to be, on edge. So we'll after the first day, then we'll be like, we got to get together and we got to really help each other.
So, Ben, you talk about the stuff they put you through in the weight room and in training and in practice and all these things. And obviously that gets you ready physically, but how much do you think that helps mentally when you get into a tough spot in a game? You're like, hey, we know we can do hard things. This isn't the first time we've been here.
Oh yeah, they say it all the time, when it's in the fourth quarter and we're dead tired and the other team's dead tired, we know we had a much harder offseason than they did. So it really goes into your mind, that our offseason was so hard and no one else could have possibly done that. So I think it really plays into our game.
If you're a typical good offensive lineman, a lot of times you don't pay attention to the extras around you, right? You obviously understand what happens underneath center, but those skill guys and it's like, oh, it's cool, but it starts with us. But how nice has it been to know that your offense is starting to fully blossom to accentuate what you guys bring to the table?
Oh, I think it's great. Bringing in those receivers, and we brought in a quarterback, and we're bringing in all these guys to really like see who's the playmaker. And we have so much depth in receiver and running back and tight end. It's going to be great to really see what everyone can do and have that depth to rotate in guys and have some fresh legs out there, and it'll be great.
How many guys you think you can play up front on the O-line? Ty says Coach Knight thinks he can play 9 or 10. How many guys you think could play power 4 caliber football for you guys before it's all said and done?
I think we got a decent 9 or 10 as well.
Really?
Yeah,
that's fantastic.
Our 2 deep is insane right now.
I like the way you say that, right? Like, because I kind of agree with you, right?
Like usually it's like you got your starting 5, you got a couple guys that might swing right or left, or they'll be the backups. Right now, we have so many guys that could play, and guys are competing for spots every day. So I think it's really important to have that depth.
Who do you like as the young guys, as kind of the leader of your veteran pack group? Who do you like? What young guys do you like?
If you count Justin Evans Jenkins as a young guy, then
he's all conference caliber at some point. He might be president of his fan club.
Yeah,
that guy right there.
Yeah, he stepped up big time last season, and having him back,
another not fake tough guy. He's a tough guy.
Oh yeah, guarantee.
So Ben, let me ask.
So I don't count him. We can't count. We can't count Justin because you love him, and so
another young guy.
Give me another young guy.
I like Gunnar Gatula.
Yeah.
Local guy. He's really buying in.
Technician.
Yeah, real technician. He's always out there getting extra work in. You can really see like his switch is flipping every time he goes into that weight room or on that field, and I can really see him being really good.
Ben, last thing from me. I know offensive linemen, they love their run blocking, right? If you had to choose, like, do you have a favorite play that you like to run that you just got to go smack somebody's head in?
Oh, I like duo.
Yeah. How long did it take you to come off and be in sync, right? Because, that's a feel kind of thing, man. And I like duo, too. And now you got some guys that can kick some guys out on that backside, too. How long did that take you to get comfy with?
Oh, I feel like it's natural. Every O-lineman loves duo. It's just built into him.
That's our guy, Ben Scott from Nebraska, offensive lineman. Ben, thanks so much for joining us. Good luck this season. We will be back with more Hurrdat Sports Radio coming up next. Kicking off hour number 3 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, KFOR in Lincoln. That's DB. I'm Ravi Lulla, and we're brought to you by Lawrence Gardens, which is a great escape for families during the summer. Explore 100 acres of vibrant gardens, watch model garden trains, hunt for pollinators, and play fun outdoor games during this latest offering, Garden Games. Ready to make memories with your family? Plan your visit at lawrencegardens.org. Joining us now is our friend Michael Bruntz from Husker 24/7. Bruntsy, what's going on?
Not much. How you guys doing?
I'm pretty Bruntz. I'm not going to kid you. I'm a little disappointed you left me. I have no wingman. Ravi doesn't count, and I'm still here and you're not. So what are we going to do about that?
I don't know. I'm sorry. We got the heck out of Dodge really early this morning. We're somewhere around Springfield, Illinois. So we're making good time. Which, as you guys know, that's all that really matters is making.
Yeah, 100%. You could be like some of these horror stories of folks that actually tried to fly and, things happen in Chicago, or, you could be like Sipple. He didn't get here until 11:30 the other night because his flights had issues. It's like sometimes you want the control of just being in the vehicle.
Yeah, we had like 4 years ago or so, I think it was, we had like a 7-hour delay at O'Hare, and we probably walked to Indianapolis they're waiting to get on the plane. So that ever since then, we've always driven and been better off for it.
Yeah, Indianapolis is weird, at least from Omaha, because we were looking at
something always happens.
Well, and we were looking at the flights, and it's like between the plane changes and the stops, I was like, it's gonna take us 8 hours of travel, whether we go to the airport or just drive. So I'd rather take my chances with the car.
Yeah, some of our reporters that cover West Coast schools, where I think there was a little bit of like, what are we doing here kind of feel to it. So, yeah, Indianapolis, gotta love it.
So I'm going to hold a couple of slots. Coach Signetti is extremely confident, and I think Our fan base will get a chance to hear that today. Obviously, Dan Lanning will come with some bravado as well for what he's also well known for. But of the guys the first 2 days, least likable is going to be too strong of a term. Who do you think of the new coaches could be the most polarizing as they enter a new conference?
Well, I mean, Lincoln Riley kind of comes with the territory, right? Like,
and he didn't help himself out yesterday, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, it was weird though. Like talking to people that cover USC, they were saying that was like the most comfortable they'd ever seen him in a setting like that. And they were saying that USC has not been, was not picked to win the conference. And, that's kind of a new thing for Lincoln Riley as well. So I don't know if they feel like, if they feel like, they're kind of flying under the radar or what, but, yeah, I was surprised at that take from some of the folks in Southern California that he seemed comfortable in his own skin, because it seemed like there was a little bit of bravado there. I don't know, like of the schools that I think are going to have some of the similar issues that Nebraska had when they entered the league, I think the two in Southern California I think they're going to find out really quick how good they are or are not along the offensive and defensive lines. Like that to me feels like it's going to be a little bit of a not come to Jesus moment, but they're certainly not going to be. They're going to figure out they're playing in a different conference pretty quickly.
I feel like you and Coach Foster are kindred spirits, letting me know that there's 2 schools in the Southern California area.
Yeah, that was helpful. I was like, I was kind of doing the Mark Cuban, like writing something down in the notebook thing. Like that, like, that's where those 2 schools are.
I kid because I want him to do well, just not at Nebraska's expense.
Bruntz, you brought up something with USC that I keep coming back to, and it's just stylistically, I don't trust it in the Big Ten, right? I look and I understand that they kind of overhaul the defense, brought in Lynn as new coordinator. I know they've got talent on offense. Just stylistically, like you said, up front in the trenches, I just do not trust. And part of it's because of what we saw in the Pac-12, right? The teams, whether it's like a Utah, whether it's an Oregon, teams that were good up front tended to give USC the most difficulty. I just can't really wrap my mind around how they're going to, in 1 year, be able to deal with that on a week in, week out basis and come out okay.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair question going into the season with them. I mean, there's no question in my mind that, most weeks they're going to line up and have better athletes than the team that's across from them. And I don't know, this week I was kind of going back to, 2011 when Nebraska came into the Big Ten. And, I think I would have said that generally, with Nebraska. I mean, they were a top 10 team coming into the Big Ten, and I would have thought back then, Nebraska's got athletes to give some of these big, slow Big Ten teams problems, and then you get out there and you kind of figure out pretty quickly that some days you got to be okay with winning 20-17 and playing field position and doing that kind of stuff that a lot of teams hate to do. And I'm kind of curious to see how USC adapts to that. I mean, I think there's going to be some games where they're going to be able to, like I said, kind of do what they want to do. But I think, you play a team like Iowa, you play a team like Wisconsin, I think it's just going to be a little bit of a different animal for them. So I think you're right. I mean, I think it's fair to question how that transition is going to go. I feel like Oregon is in a little bit of a better spot to be able to be good up front. I think they've recruited well there for a while on both sides of the line. But the 2 Southern California schools, I do wonder how that's going to go up front the first year.
Speaking of up front, we talked to Ben Scott yesterday, and he said this phrase and he said it with confidence and conviction. So I had to go back and listen to it again. He said, "Our 2 deep is insane." when I talked about the defensive or the offensive line depth. Kind of did quick math in his head, said they felt like they could play 9 or 10 guys. He went further to say you can have 2 swings usually, the left or the right. You got 2 guys that can kind of fill in. With us, that's not the case. When's the last time, if he's right, when's the last time you could remember that ever being uttered? And does it even make sense to hear it out loud for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing to like say it, and it's another thing to like actually do the math on like who could help you. Because I feel like in the past they're like, oh, they got great depth, and then like it comes down to it, and
wait, who is the 8th guy again? Who is the 7th guy again?
Saying, yeah,
and you're scrambling, right? But you could get to Latovsky, Corcoran,
Gatula, we talked about. Yeah.
Evans, and they're not in your starting lineup potentially.
yeah.
Although Corcoran probably will be, but
Like
I'm just Mazuka. Like you can get to 9 in a hurry.
Yeah, I mean, and the guard position especially is going to be pretty fascinating with how that shakes out. Because I mean, I think in some ways and in some people's minds that's been kind of a settled deal, and like who's going to be your 2 guys there. And I don't know that that's necessarily the case. It feels like that might be something that kind of goes into fall camp for who's going to emerge there. But yeah, I mean, maybe some of like the early Big Ten era teams were like, it felt like they had about 7 guys that they could play. But I mean, I don't remember Nebraska having that kind of actual playable depth, and that's the benefit to some of the decisions that were made. I mean, that line looks completely different going into this year if you don't have Bryce Benhart, Ben Scott back. I mean, those guys have played a ton of football. Bryce Benhart, I believe, is going to basically set the record for most starts by a Nebraska offensive lineman opener. And, that just gives you so much confidence that you're going to be strong up front. I'm eager to kind of see, Matt Rule said yesterday, he's like, that this line is finally not going to have to run against defenses selling out to stop the run. I'm kind of curious to see what that'll look like, especially with the veteran group.
Bruntz, I just can't believe that last year at the spring game, we weren't sure if they were going to be able to play a real football game because they weren't sure if they had 5 offensive linemen. And now we're talking about 9 or 10 playable guys in regular season Big Ten football play. Like, I just, how was he able to to get this roster to a place? Because it's not just the offensive line, right? How was Rule able to get the roster to a place where there is so much depth at so many different positions in like barely a year?
Well, I mean, I think part of it has to do with the way they practice. I mean, I think there's younger guys that are, because of the way they practice and the number of reps that they get, are more ready to be called upon if they have to. Especially with the offensive line. I mean, they've taken 2 really large offensive line classes in back-to-back years. And I mean, your question about, basically being able to play a real football game in the spring game, I mean, they had to add numbers there because it was so dire. And then you go to this year's spring game where they sat out a number of the veteran guys and you didn't even miss them, so I think that it's the way they practice. I think the fact that, that they take advantage in a good way. And I'm thinking on the defensive line of the 4 game redshirt rule. I mean, Suala Fotu is going to be better off for having played 4 games last year. I know Riley Van Poppel went over the 4 level, but like he got significant snaps in big games against Big Ten teams. I mean, I just think they're really kind of smart with the way that they handle young guys. And I think too that kind of playing time is a little bit of a carrot in some ways too, for those guys to develop and kind of get a taste for things. So I think it's recruiting in the way that they've done it. It helps that you're able to keep guys around too, and guys having to hit the portal from those 2 areas. And, offensive line-wise, I think you do have to give a lot of credit to Donovan for the way that he's kind of built that culture in that room. I mean, they're going on 3 years of continuity along that offensive line, and that's a big deal. I mean, I think guys have really bought in there, and when you're able to kind of replenish that offensive line group with large recruiting classes, I think it sets you up to be able to do something.
We got to stay with the the whole Michael Bruntz theme of, I feel like every week some sort of Venn diagram and shading comes up. Okay, so if we're gonna see what overlaps here, Coach Rule's outward confidence, right? He's much more outspoken about the belief factor and what he feels about this team. He relates it to the players and their confidence and seeing it in the building and how he feels like he wants them to be a confident team. If we're going to shade in the diagram, how much of it is you think it's modeled behavior versus that's what he really believes about this football team heading into 2024?
I mean, I think he really believes it. I mean, I don't think he would say it because I mean, you guys know how that is. I mean, if you're disingenuous about kind of what your outlook is, it can really bite you if things don't go well. And, from listening to him yesterday, I mean, I think he really believes that they've gotten better at positions where they were not very good last year. He kind of he trailed off when he said it, but when he was talking about the wide receiver group and about how much better they are, he started to say, and it's not even close.
Yeah.
Which, I think they have a fair amount of confidence in that running back room too, which I think outside the walls, maybe not the case, but I think inside the walls, they feel like there's guys that can run the ball and they can win with. And I think if you're good along the lines, I mean, that always gives you a pretty good chance. So, I think everybody's going to focus on the quarterback spot in fall camp, and rightfully so. But I think they've also gotten good enough around the quarterback that, what did he say yesterday? You get better by taking out the bad. Like, I think that's kind of what they've done at some of the skill position spots. So
that's a low-key good line.
Yeah, no, and I think I think he really believes that. I mean, his history would suggest that there's a year 2 climb that's set up there, and a lot of the off-season returnees that they got, I think it kind of bodes pretty well for ultimately what they can be this season.
We're talking back with Michael Bruntz from Husker 24/7. Bruntz, you mentioned some of the returnees, and one of them was on that defensive line that was here yesterday in Ty Robinson as well. Can I make the argument that maybe the only place that has more depth than the offensive line might be that defensive line?
Yeah, I would accept that argument. Yeah, I mean, when you just kind of go through the list, I mean, you're asking when was the last time Nebraska had that much depth along the offensive line? I mean, when was the last time Nebraska could probably run a 3 deep out there at defensive line and be pretty comfortable with what they're putting on the field? Like, you think back, I mean, there's some years where Nebraska had some defensive line injuries, and all of a sudden you're having to, you got Cameron Meredith playing tackle, the Suolafotu is a name that continues to come up, and he's probably your 3rd defensive tackle right now behind Van Poppel and Nash. I think they've also got guys that are difference makers. I mean, I think Jabari Butler's poised for a really big year. And, Ty Robinson finished last season playing the best football of his career in those last 4 games. So I think there's some intrigue there with what he could be. So, yeah, I mean, I think you just kind of go down the list at that spot. And, I mean, that's not even talking about a guy like Elijah Judy, who I think they're hoping can kind of be an X factor for him too, after having a pretty quiet first season at Nebraska. So that's a group that you can build around. And I mean, you guys, I'm sure heard Matt Rule say this yesterday too. I mean, as much as everybody's going to focus on the offense, he kind of said so much of what they're going to be able to do is if the defense improves too. I mean, that's a high bar considering what they were last year.
Well, and there was another guy on the defensive line that none of us have said, and I hadn't heard his name for months until Ty Robinson brought him up. But Vincent Jackson is another guy that kind of fits that mold you were talking about of guys that, whether it's Sulifotu or just guys that we don't talk about, that I think they would be really comfortable rolling out there and not really seeing a ton of drop off.
Yeah. I mean, and it's nice too when you have options like that, where, like, let's say Sua can go in there and give you 15 good snaps a game. I mean, that's a significant thing for a defense in the Big Ten. If you can just kind of stream guys in there, because I mean, I think they've tried to do that in years past, but I mean, when that second line ran in there, I mean, there was usually a pretty noticeable drop off across the board. And I think there is somewhat of one this year, but I don't think it's significant enough to where they wouldn't trust any of those guys going in there and getting some work done.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. I just got to go back to the offensive line real quick. Tyler Knock can play. Bryce Benhart can play. Jacob Hood can play. Ben Scott can play. Mazuka can play. Prohaska can play. Justin Evans Jenkins can play. Henry Lutovsky has played. Ben Scott can play. That's 9 without me stressing, because they've all played. Like,
yeah.
And it was just free rolling right there, like no big deal. And the weird thing is, I said to Ravi, I go, fact or fiction, the way that Coach Rule talks about the portal and maybe plugging holes, because he likes for guys to do the right thing and have a place in the program. I said, in just a year and a half, you could make the case this is almost a hole plugging roster, right? Not spot filling.
Yeah.
Closer to fact or fiction?
Closer to fact. I mean, I think what they've done, and Matt Rule has said this, I mean, they've essentially tried to overhaul the roster while keeping the roster the way it is.
It's unbelievable. Yeah.
That's not an easy.
Doesn't even sound right. I mean, say that. What? Like, how did you word that again?
It sounds like it shouldn't make any sense.
No, it doesn't. I mean, like, they tried to overhaul the roster without pushing guys out the door. Like, and guys left, and that's fine. But I mean, I think they were able to hit in the portal at key spots. I mean, Ben Scott was probably the biggest addition they made out of the portal in that first cycle. I mean, when you can nail that center spot, that's a big deal. And they added some other pieces. MJ Sherman, I think, is going to have a good year. I think he's poised to be there this year. And they added those guys in key spots, but also, I mean, you look at the numbers of players that they've added that are freshmen and redshirt freshmen and in the program right now. They're kind of doing both. And, I think luckily for Nebraska in some ways is they had, some of these guys with COVID years left over. Because I think what it does is when you have guys like Isaac Gifford coming back, you have Benhart coming back, you have Scott coming back, is it buys you a little bit more time to develop guys behind them rather than having to push guys in and they're not ready. So, I mean, yeah, I think it's been an interesting rebuild, and I think they've kind of gone about it in a much different way than a lot of programs do, especially when, you've got graphics flashing on the Big Ten Network about, a team losing 40 guys to the portal and adding 25. Like, that's just not how Nebraska's done it.
I just chuckled listening to you say that with the COVID year. Just think in your head that Jamari Butler could come back next year if he wanted to.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think he will, but I mean, he certainly could, because he could have a monster year. But that's kind of, when you get inside the roster construction, I don't know if I can exactly repeat it, but I got the gist of what you said. He turned the roster over without really changing the roster.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I don't. That's the best way I can say it. Is, I mean, they've done a good job of turning it over without running guys off, like actively running guys off. And in the age of NIL and the transfer portal, I think that's kind of a delicate thread to kind of operate on, but they've done a good job of it.
That's Michael Bruntz from Husker 24/7. Bruntsy, we appreciate the time as always. It was good to see you yesterday briefly, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Safe travels, you guys.
Yep, you too, guys. Take care.
Speaking of safe travels, make sure hands on the wheel, eyes in focus, straight ahead. The driver has one job to do, to drive. This message from the NDOT Highway Safety Office, especially if you've got DB in the car. He's very distracting. You got to be careful out there. We'll be back with more Hurrdat Sports Radio coming up next.
Not near as bad as your music.
We're back here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, KFOR in Lincoln. That's DB. I'm Ravi. Lulla, reminding you can get your Hill varsity football yearbooks for 2024 ordered at hurrdatsports.com. Make sure you check it out. A bunch of super cool stuff in there, like exclusive interviews, insights, photos, the whole thing. Get yours between now and August 11th at hurrdatsports.com. I also want to give a shout out to one of our listeners, one of our guys that's in YouTube all day, every day, which we love. Our guy, Will Pickering.
Oh, Thrill?
Hit a big bench PR today at 355. That's getting it done, Will.
I've seen no parts of that ever.
Nice work, my guy. That's getting after it. So we appreciate all of our people in the YouTube stream.
I don't picture Will as a big guy in my head.
I didn't either, and so I asked him.
And maybe he's not, but 355 is a good number.
Some people can just get after it, but we got a nice little community in our stream over there. I appreciate that.
I know was that Sasha?
Yeah.
That said, I like how we kind of have it's like its own community.
Yeah, they're like they're friends with each other. Will talked about his PR, and they're like, "Yeah, Will, let's go." I like it.
Yeah,
I appreciate
and
that.
Every community needs a tiger shark, so I'm glad
we do. Apparently, he's a Miller North guy.
I'm a big tiger shark guy.
We got in there a little bit. He was a little after me.
I like bull sharks and I like great whites, but tigers are aggressive.
Tigers are aggressive. It's how we roll at Miller North. We get after it a little bit.
I didn't know he was a stanger.
Yeah, we found that out
Not
yesterday.
to be confused with Gage.
Yeah, not Gage. He's a different guy.
Although tiger sharks are violent like that.
Like roll stangs, not stanger.
Oh, because he's pretty violent too.
Well, he got some violent tendencies a little bit.
Runs into things at a high level.
So we've got ACC media days kind of running concurrently with Big Ten media days here, and
is your attention distracted, Skirnol?
No, not really. I check in a little bit. I did notice.
You hit Ryan for updates.
Yeah, I gotta get my guy Ravi. Like, what's going on, man? Keep him distracted from some of the other nonsense they talks about sometimes. But no, something caught my attention about what some of the Florida State guys were saying. Surprise, surprise. I know it's shocking, but
surprise.
They were talking about how they're still thinking about the playoff snub from last year.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, they called it a snub. I'm not calling it a snub. I understand why they were left out. You can make an argument that I think you did earlier this week that Georgia was one of the 4 best teams in the country.
I said it the morning that I said you can't in the same. I'm not going to undercut the topic here, but you made Florida State and Georgia was the 5-6 matchup.
Mm-hmm.
Georgia was a 6. You made Florida State the 5. If it was about the best teams, even that seeding doesn't
make any sense, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, the whole point is the whole seeding didn't make sense with the college football playoff, whatever, right? So I get that. But the thing that caught my attention is that they are saying out loud, "Hey, that's still something we're thinking about. We're still thinking about the snub." Now, the reason I wanted to talk about it is because you have experience in something very similar to this.
Yeah, being motivated by a loss.
And theirs was an off-field loss, right? Yours was obviously an on-field loss, but there were things that happened in that game that you felt like were taken out of your hands in terms of how that game played out. So I think there's overlap there. And I know for you guys,
100%.
I know for you guys, because you've told me about it, that was a big factor.
It's huge.
I think you told me before, hey, we don't win in 94 if we don't lose in 93.
I firmly believe that. Maybe we get back there and we could have won it, but I know
that put you over the top.
Yeah, like I know what those off-season workouts were like. I know how much we talked about it. I know a minute 16 was on the scoreboard. Right? It's 101 degrees out there on some old raggedy turf, and there's a minute 16 on the scoreboard. I remember it clearly.
Yeah.
And it was up there every day we were at OTAs.
So my question here is, obviously that motivated you guys in the right way.
Mhm.
Is there a way where that can go wrong?
Well, I think as long as you keep it about the things that you can control, and I get the oxymoron, right? They did everything that they could control, but they're going to make you do it to them again.
Yeah.
If that's the case.
Right. Be like,
Right.
hey, you're going to have to say it out loud twice.
Yep.
That we're going to go 13-0 or whatever.
And own it, right?
Yeah.
So the whole leave no doubt thing, I don't really see any downsides to that. I'm not typically a negative motivator guy over time.
I'll say short term it works.
Short term, especially if you're focused on the right things. Like
if it leads you to be focused on the right things.
I'm like, I'm okay with that. I don't really see the downs, especially in this particular instance.
Sure. Right.
Right. Because again, a lot of people talk about what they weren't and what they've lost. I still think, and I know maybe you're just tucking a little bit because you're a fan, but I don't think people believe in them as a power.
Not from last year. I don't think at any point last year they looked at Florida State and were, because that's how it was easy to leave him out, right? Is as soon as Jordan Travis got hurt, it was easy to leave him out because I think through a lot of last year they were like, on Florida State. I think nationally people were compared to whether it's Texas, Alabama, whoever else, right? And so, and I get that. I watched those games. I get that they didn't look the same way some of those other teams did. The other thing I was wondering,
go
ahead.
Neither did Washington.
No, they didn't. That's the elephant in the room, right? Is if Jordan Travis is healthy, what's the difference between Florida State and Washington? Yeah. Because you're gonna have a hard time convincing me there was much of one.
I get it.
The other question there is though, with you guys in '93 going into '94, there was a ton of overlap personnel wise. Right? Like the roster was very similar.
Yeah.
Does that matter? Because Florida State is dealing with a certain amount of turnover, especially at some key spots. How much does that matter in using last year as a motivator?
As long as you have enough.
Okay.
I don't know what the magic number is for missing.
There has to be a point, right?
Because I mean, I remember we were missing an integral part. You know, Trev didn't come back in '94.
Trev didn't come back. Weird.
Yeah. Wow. You know, but we had enough of that mainstay core,
kind of the core group.
It didn't matter at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I always, the negative motivator thing is kind of what gets me, right? Because I'm kind of with.
I mean, do you want Verse to come back for it to mean something?
Well, I mean, I'm not saying he should have come back.
No, I'm just saying like let's say a guy like Verse was, but how many would be enough of that? That's my.
And I don't know. I don't know.
And I don't either.
I don't know the magic number either, but I do feel like there is one.
Yeah.
And I don't know if there's enough of that at Florida State for that to work.
Depends on how your head coach uses it.
That's fair. What I know what we've seen from Mike Norvell so far is be pretty good at figuring stuff out.
Yeah, and he can. Petty isn't the word, but he does strike me as a guy that keeps receipts.
Oh, 100%. He is not somebody that forgets about.
And that might be all it takes.
Slights or so-called slights or whatever. And, I think there's even.
I mean, they're taking it. If he wanted, you could look at that as they're taking a shot at him too.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, not a good enough coach to overcome this.
Yeah. Even though they did overcome it.
Yeah, not a good enough coach to overcome this.
It's not like Jordan Travis got hurt in the ACC championship game.
So I'm sure he feels some type of way about that too. There's the part of him that hurts for the kids. Like, there's enough in there.
Can you make it a university thing too? Like they don't respect Florida State?
I don't know. I think Florida State's kind of got a little bit of a double whammy. So there's that.
Mm-hmm.
And also, your conference slapped your wrist pretty good at ACC Media Days. Like, I mean, they pretty much treated you like a young child and said, don't ever in your life do that again. Like, I mean, that was the message that I got. And that was pretty much all of day one.
Yeah, it really was. That's a hard pill to swallow as probably the best team in that league.
So you have to make it about you.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, are you riding with the conference?
Absolutely not. Because you're trying to get out of there.
I don't think all of a sudden you're like flying the ACC banner.
Well, and if you're Florida State, don't you kind of feel like it's the ACC's fault that the rest of the teams weren't good enough to boost you?
If that's how that's the part that I don't think will travel well. Because you need the ACC to be a good partner in this one.
That makes
even
sense.
though you weren't.
All right, coming up next, we recorded this interview with Ty Robinson yesterday, so we'll wrap up the show with this. It's not going to be a normal ending segment, so I'm just giving you a heads up now, but it is an incredible interview with Ty Robinson.
Yeah, it really
good
is.
stuff out of him. So DB will be back tomorrow, and special guest for you. He's going to be here with Vers for the whole show, so enjoy that.
I'm hoping to stay on air.
I'm taking a vacation. DB will talk to you tomorrow. I'll see you Monday. Welcome back to Hurrdat Sports Radio here on AM 590 ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, and we are live here with Ty Robinson from Nebraska. Ty, what's going on, man?
I'm having a great time. Thanks for having me.
You surprised? He looks like he could be modeling. All these guys are like sleek, slim, and trim.
Can
now.
I just say, like, it upsets me as kind of a dumpy kind of shaped guy that we got these 300-pounders walking around looking like lean, like they could step on a bodybuilding stage. It upsets me a little bit. I'm just gonna be honest with you.
You gotta love the frame. You're smiling. You feel good. You look like you look good, man. You got to be living your best life, and right before the season starts.
Yeah, you and Jay really helped boost the confidence walking out here with the nice suit on from Gary Michaels. So, yeah, no, I'm feeling great. It's great to be out here to represent Nebraska at Big Ten Media Days.
Man, it's a cool thing that you decided to come back, right? Like, I mean, you had the opportunity to maybe explore some other options, whether it's professional football or whatever it was. And I've kind of been fascinated by this, the guys that either they don't get in the portal, they have an opportunity to leave and decide to come back. Just what about Nebraska and this program? If you just said, like, I think I want to run it back one more time.
Yeah, man, I think just who I am as a person, I'm super loyal. And Nebraska's been really loyal to me. So I feel like I owe them everything throughout my football career in college. And I think coming back, with Coach Rule and Coach Knighton, seeing the potential that I had last year to what it could be if I stayed another year. I had shoulder surgery that last January, and I was out for 6 months. So I really only had the summer and fall camp to really get ready and get back into football shape. And, towards the end of the season last year, I think I started to finally click with me and be able to play good football. So I think my thought process was, come back for another year. It's not the end of the world. Get to train under some of the great guys in this country and then become a football player.
Yeah, that wasn't even really your probably first big decision. I remember being on campus right after Coach Rule first got here. You guys were talking out in front of the stadium. It was just the two of you.
Yeah.
And it appeared to be a fairly good conversation. It from far away, it looked like it was very thoughtful, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you had some things to think about then too, right? The buy-in, the new staff, like you got to kind of go all the way back to that moment where you're like, you either thought he was going to have it or you didn't.
Right,
what was
right.
that like?
Yeah, no, I mean, I
you remember that?
Yeah, I remember that conversation. He was just kind of getting to know each other. I think he'd just come off that press conference, and he was coming out and introduced himself. I introduced myself, and he's just kind of talking about the things he wanted to start here in Nebraska, and kind of what the greatest thing I've seen him do is want to learn the history of Nebraska and the culture. And I mean, he is so. The way he thinks is so methodical and just so going through all of that, I gave him the benefit of the doubt. I was like, all right, I'm going to see what he's all about. And, through the first 2 weeks, I was like, I'm bought in. Like I've heard everything I need to hear. And if he sticks by his word, this is going to be a lot of fun to be a part of.
Does the methodology match how good of a speaker he is?
Yes, 100%. That man is thinking 20 words ahead. That man is racing. I mean, the methodology is there.
You know what's wild is I feel like I can ask him anything. We talked to him earlier yesterday, whenever it was. I don't know. It's a blur here at Big Ten Media Days. But, I feel like I can ask him just about anything, and he's already thought about it, which is a wild.
From Bushido to Shogun to
anything, right? I'm talking
the Cooking Channel to World War II to Tampa 2 versus Chopper, right? Like
we're getting from like philosophy to football to whatever and everything in between. And I feel like I can ask that dude anything, and I have some level of certainty that he's already thought about it. And what makes me feel a little dumb that I didn't think about it earlier, but it's incredible to just like, what's that look like up close and personal when you're when you just have this confidence, you're like, I can bring anything to this guy, and he's thought about it already before I even did.
Right. Yeah. I mean, when we talk football, I mean, my football knowledge is already expanded when he's explaining, an offense, or he's coming and watch film with us. I'm like, I really didn't really think of it that way. I mean, he used to be a former D-line coach, so he knows what he's talking about. And then he coached my coach, and now my coach is coaching me. So it's practically, word of mouth towards, all the way down to me. So yeah, no, he's definitely thought of everything.
So the culture has to be really, really good, because your position group is one of a few that is pretty competitive, right? I mean, you play 7-8 guys, it led by the gruesome twosome in the middle, right? I mean, there has to be kind of this level of comfort and being other centered to want the young guys to flourish while you're still doing your thing.
Yeah.
Who starts that?
Yeah. So I think, are you asking who, the young guy? Yeah. So Cam Lenhart's probably been, a guy that I really liked watching. And when he got here, he was early enrollee from IMG. Judy, he came in from Texas A&M. I mean, watching him flourish. Vincent Carroll. James,
you don't mind doing that, right?
No, not at all.
That is cool.
Yeah, no, because my thing is, when I committed here in 2019, their big thing was, listen, it's going to be a rebuild, but I want to bring Nebraska back. And so that's been, the goal of mine. So when I leave here, I want to know that the guys behind me are going to be thinking the same way that I was, and just making this place better.
How much does the culture replicate that?
100%. And the thing is, the culture in the locker room between the guys since I've been here hasn't wavered, hasn't changed once. I mean, it's a pretty close, tight-knit group in there. I mean, I can go over and talk with the young guys. I can talk with the freshman that's this guy here. I can go talk to the receivers and, joke around and just have a conversation with them, DBs, whoever it may be. That's how close of a locker room we have.
You see it modeled with the staff?
Yeah, 100%. Coach Rulla runs a tight ship.
Everybody says that.
Coach Rulla runs a tight ship, but, it's all love, and you can tell it comes from a great place in his heart. And, I mean, his staff reflects that as well.
Ty, at what point did you mentioned Cam Lenhart, right? You had I know Prince Will kind of, was playing a little D-lines, playing some jack, whatever. I'm going to lump him in here too. At what point did you know some of those young guys were like, oh, these guys might be pretty good?
Yeah, I think it was I got to see it a little bit in spring ball last year, since I was just watching because I was out with my shoulder. And I saw a lot of potential. And then I got to be in the summer, and, watching is a lot different than doing it with the guys. And, I could tell that their mentality, I mean, it's just gritty, just doing the work, not really complaining, just, all right, let's get this done. Let's do what we have to do and get out of here.
Is that the biggest difference between when you see young guys come in that are ready to go and young guys that maybe need a minute? Is it the physicality more, or is it just like the mental side of it, where they're just locked in?
It's definitely probably the mentality of it. And, I mean, some guys are more physically. I mean, I was a guy that had to come in and wait my turn. I mean, Coach Rulla showed a clip of me in fall camp last year, my freshman year. He's like, look at this guy. You do not think this guy would play a snap of football before. And now he's one of our starting D tackles. So, just being able to watch that mentality, I think. And I mean, our group is pretty special. Sometimes just one guy is just more ready than the other guy, but there's a chance. I mean, T Knight wants to play at least 8 to 10 guys a game.
I believe
to have a rotation, and he wants to get everybody as much as he can in the game.
How much of what you guys do you appreciate or take away from how tight knit and what a one unit the guys that you go against every day are on that offensive line? Because that's the other group that I would say just watching is the closest to the camaraderie and moving as one.
Literally, they literally move as one. I mean, we joke around and call them the herd, but I mean, before lifts, they'll line meet up, group together, and they'll go into the lift. So they're always together, whatever it is, football wise, doing what they need to do. I came in with a lot of those guys, and it's just awesome to finally see them become the football players that I knew that they could become. And I mean, they're making me better every day. They're making us better every day, and they've come a long way. I'm really, really proud of those guys.
I'm always captivated listening to you. How does such a nice guy turn it on come game time? You play so much different than your personality.
I think it's just, it goes into that whole mentality thing. 2 years ago or 3 years ago, maybe, Jay Foreman and Jason Peter would come out to practice with us.
Guys, yeah.
And, I kind of understood it in high school, and then I got here, and JP really stood by the defensive line for most of practice, and I think he helped mentor me into kind of that
that what we
that
call it
kind
now?
of
That's a nice way to put it.
mindset. Yeah, mentor me.
That guy peed on my shoes in the locker room. I know all about that
There's
mentoring.
lots of mentoring going on there.
But
They
yeah,
were
just,
olive 11s to be exact.
yeah, no, just help me kind of hone in on that aggressiveness, that what it takes to play D line. I mean, you can't be a nice guy playing D line. You're just going to get pushed around, shoved around. But and then definitely, just hype myself before the game. I'm usually by myself. Go in the hot tub, cold tub, take a shower, and then I got my headphones on for the rest until we're out there in pregame.
Ty, about a minute left here with you real quick. You had a defense last year that was really good. I think took some people by surprise with how good you guys were. What's the mentality of following that up and trying to improve on that this year?
So Coach White likes to say this. This defense this year hasn't done nothing. Last year doesn't mean anything. We are starting over. You guys, I mean, as the older guys who played last year, like, okay, well, I mean, we'll follow you along on this. But I mean, to a certain point, he's not wrong. I mean, the new defense that we have, there's new guys in it. We got to learn to find a way to play with each other, communicate with each other, and be able to be out there and play as one in every position.
If you could take sacks or tackles for losses, where do you want to improve the most?
Sacks, definitely. It would hurt me to only have one sack last year, as I was so close to a lot of them. But I think that's been kind of my thing through the spring and the summers is trying to find it to get that one extra step to get closer.
I mean, you're looking lean and mean. I think you might have got that extra step. That's Ty Robinson. Ty, we appreciate the time and good luck this year.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tate.